Amen. God's grace is with us. Again, very welcome. I see we are many of us here this morning. That is good. And I trust the good Lord has something for us this morning. Thank you for praying. In general, I assume that you pray for the one that is supposed to have the message or has the opportunity to have the message. And through the week, I am living with the idea that I can feel that. And I hang on to that. That's very precious. Today's subject, or the topic, is in connection, or it's in mind, especially to family life or home life. There's something for all of us, I trust. It doesn't matter in what age group you fit. I have especially thought of the young families or the people that are in the middle of family life at home. So the topic, I call it this: the future, how does it lay before you? Which side will you choose? And so we are going to look, in our message, we will look at two different men, how they chose their future, how they made choices, and how it impacted their future. And I hope we can learn from that. I realize that every time when you sit there and you say, that's a good message, I'm glad that he's going to talk about that. But many times after the message is over, we are somewhat left with the feeling, he didn't really speak on my issues. You know, it was a good message, but really my problem wasn't all that directly addressed. And I realize that is exactly how it could be. You know, we already heard Carlin and Rosie and their baby in Winnipeg. Now, how in the young man's life or the young couple's life, how do you put something like that into your vision as you think of raising a family? How often do you, as young men, as you think about the future, maybe you're planning on getting married here sooner than later, and how often do you have that in the plan that me and my wife will have a little baby and we'll deal with something, even though it's not always like right away in the hospital, but it's something like that. Or how often have we as younger couples put that into our mind or into our vision when we think of that we're going to have a few little children and we will just be tired as tired can be, and the little child is still going to cry, and it's just in and amongst all of that, we're going to have a very nice home. You know what? We'll just all be love, and it's just going to shine and all of that. You know, sometimes as young families, it's during those times when we tend to lose courage. You come into this midlife time when your younger children are getting grown-ups, and you start to realize that you're dealing with something like what people used to call midlife crisis, and you wonder whether you are personally dealing with something like that. Menopause, premenopause, these things you do not talk about. And yet we have to live through life, and we need to deal with them somehow. And somehow we have the idea that it works for everybody except for us. And we don't talk about that. Or we don't like to talk. We wish somebody would dare to talk about that. Or then you come to even an older life, and some of these older men are telling me that I am very close to their age, so okay, count me in if you want. But you come to that stage of life where you say, kind of the train is past and my time of influence is all past. My children are all on their own, making their own choices and decisions. And so I'm just you know what, if you want to really look at it from the negative side, you would say, I'm of that leftover part. My dad used to say that if he would die, we didn't lose much. And I said, Dad, that's just your opinion, but that's not mine. And so we still need you. I was debating of calling my message And we could call it embracing the future with a vision. And so when we look into the future, we all would like to see a positive, a good outcome of our life, of our home. I'm convinced of that. There is very likely today some of us sitting here, or at least in the morning when we got out of bed, that we struggled with some feelings like, is it truly not going to work for us? Like, will we be that couple that will just simply fall into pieces? And will it just not work like for our family? Maybe it's our children or our teenagers. Well, all of them are our children, but we tend to question it sometimes. Will we be like? And then we have pictures of families that we hope we never become like them. I remember me telling my mother that me and Marcela, we had decided, this was before we got married, okay? We had decided we would not be like some of those older people that you couldn't see that they had any love between them. They were just living side by side. And my mother never argued with that. And today I think she just thought, well, figure it out. It's easy for you to say something like that. But between now and then, you will have a lot of battles to fight. How will you fight them? So that is basically where we want to look at today. We have two men that we're going to watch or look closely, and then we want to get some application to that. So in your Bibles, turn with me to Genesis. And we're starting here in chapter 13, and some of you already now know who we're going to talk about, and that's Lot. Genesis chapter 13. It's a good story. Some of you have been here in person. Geography has changed. Israel is not what you read that it was in Genesis chapter 13. If ever you struggle with when people come back and give you slideshows of the pictures they've seen in Israel, and then you go and you read it for yourself, you realize there's conflict. When you would have a picture of this geographical area, then you would say something doesn't match. Geography has changed. Israel isn't like it used to be. It's been destroyed many times. But anyway, here we are, Genesis chapter 13, verse 9. We're going to start there. The background is that Lot and Abraham or their servants were having a struggle because there was not enough grass. So they would constantly fight. They would probably chase the other side's sheep and goats away. And they would probably break out in a fight. Talking about not having enough grass or talking about not having enough to eat. I remember my father-in-law asked me a question, and I'm going to ask you the same question. The scenario was this. He said, and this was real. This has been real to some, maybe to even some of you, but we are hearing that things are not really going well for some other people in the world. My father-in-law asked me the question. He says, so if you leave your children and wife behind because you have to go out at the end of the town because there's the well and there's water at the well. That's the only source of water for the entire town. Your wife and your children plus your cattle, but they're thirsty. They're expecting that you will bring water home. So as a man, you go out there. When you come to the end of the town, then you realize that your neighbor took a lot more water than his share. And because of that, you cannot bring water home. Your children and your wife will be thirsty, frustrated when you come home because you have no water. This is the question. My father-in-law asked me, Ronald, do you think that you are spiritual enough to deal with that? And then I realized what he wanted to ask with the question. And that was, for me, in my nice looking jacket, it's very easy to say, that's wrong that you fight there. But if I was in the same shoes, who knows how I would have handled that? God forbid that we would fight. These people here in Genesis chapter 13, they were fighting. It was a continuous problem. And so Abraham has an advice, let's separate. So in verse 9, the question Abraham asks is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. Now verse 10, that's our main verse for today. This is the verse that you and I, in one or the other way, all can connect with. Whether you are a young boy trying to, figuring out to get married and planning to get married, whether you move to this area and wanting to raise your family here, or whether you're in the middle of living here, raising a family, verse 10 has something for us to connect with. And Lot lifted up his eyes. Okay, now we're casting a vision. What will we be? What's the future holding for us? And beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. They had just been from Egypt. They were just back. They lived in Egypt, Abraham and Lot. You could read that in the beginning of the chapter. As thou comest unto Zoar. Zoar is south of the Dead Sea. It used to be underwater. I think nowadays it's not underwater anymore, but Zoar is there. So a few things to just take note. It says it's like the land of Egypt. So Abraham had moved to Egypt due to famine in Canaan with Lot. They had moved back, and now they were in a totally different problem. Their people were fighting because they had outgrown the grass. So he can see part of that Egyptian life could come back, because in Egypt they had lots of grass. Then Lot chose all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. Let's leave it there for now. Let's go 13. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. We will read till there. Here is a man who looks into the future. What is there? He sees the grass. That's what the Bible underscores. He sees the good land, and he makes an action on that. I want to bring our attention to something, and that is probably we that have studied and have a pretty good idea of what Lot's life turned to be, and by the time he got old and finally died, this picture of the green grass has long time faded away. We don't see Lot. When we think of Lot, I don't think that anybody of us really has this idea or gets the picture of a beautiful farm somewhere in a lushy green area with a lot of sheep, because he had a lot of sheep. He had a lot of cattle, and he had the chances to move into a rich country where he could farm to the fullest. And we don't read about that at all in the Bible, how that turned and how many years that was. We don't know that. But we know that that is not the picture we have of Lot. So that is where we want to turn, and that's where we want to learn a lesson, and that is that the decisions that were made at this time were based on something that entirely has gotten out of the picture. The decision that you and I are doing what we're doing today is that of such that we will still 40, 45 years from now say it's still part of your life. And it's still a blessing to your life. This is the point that I want to drill to us as young people, young parents and young people. But the thing that makes you decide, how will that have an impact in you, in your life 40 years from now? It wasn't a bad idea to choose good land. Our forefathers have done that all the time. We, Marcel and me, moved to this area because we chose this area, not necessarily because of the green grass, but there was something in the area that we liked. The decision made an impact. The decision brought change. There's something in Lot to consider. Lot saw an easier lifestyle, good income, a good farming, a good productive land. Therefore, Lot could almost 100% be sure that he would financially succeed. This would just be a dream come true. Have we ever been in conversations that kind of push that idea? Let's be where we prosper. This is good. That in itself was not wrong, okay? Let's understand that. What we notice as we continue reading, that Lot slowly moved closer to the city. Whether that was retirement or whether that was prosperity, we don't know, but we know he moved closer to the city. At first, he still lived in the grassland. Maybe he had a good excuse to just shelter himself in the city, because out on the land he would be more exposed to theft and wars. What we can conclude in Lot's life was that he saw that in this way I can live an easier life. Good income. Lots of grass. And so Lot was impacted by those choices. Well, let's remember, and this I speak especially to every father, but to all of us, remember, if there is no battle to fight, there is no faith required. It's a bad decision if I choose a life or a choice that will require no battle. If I am very financial focused, financial success will make me choose. It will make me choose a battle of a lesser fight. We realize how Lot moves. He moves on. We also have to know that if there's no battles to fight, there is no victories to talk about. Somehow we don't see a man of great battles in Lot's life, yet in 2 Peter we read about the Bible speaking about him being tormented from day to day. It leaves us with the idea that Lot never lived a very enjoyable life. He was tormented. Read it for yourself. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 and 8. It even calls him a just man. So I expect to see Lot in the glories one day. But we do not have the idea that he lived a very enjoyable life. Yes, we know he was later considered a man big enough to sit in the gate of Sodom. You read that in Genesis chapter 19. He sat there when the angels came, and he took the angels to his own home. In verse 7, he's referring to the man of Sodom, his brothers. So it gives us the idea that he was getting very connected to them. In fact, what we notice in his life we cannot believe is that he was willing to give his 2 daughters to the street life of Sodom for the sake of his brethren. And so that gives us a very negative impression. At the end of the chapter, and we're just not going in all the details, but in the end of the chapter Genesis chapter 19, we see a man who was old, who was widowed, and that itself didn't mean any negative, but he was alone with his daughters, living in a cave, somewheres totally poor. Lonely, poor, drunk, no influence, a shameful reputation. Now that leaves out all this other part of his life where he was taken captive and all that, and he lost everything in Genesis chapter 14. But we realize how the choice was a big part of that, the rest of his life. So we're going to leave Lot here because we want to apply some of that to us here in just a little bit. Now, geographically speaking, we're almost in the same place again. But we are 300 and about 300 and, I'm not sure, between 300 and 350 years later. I'm not sure that number. Don't hold me to that number. But several hundred years later, almost at the same place, we have a man making a choice. Turn, if you will, to Numbers, and we will pick it up from there. The book of Numbers, chapter 13, I believe it is. So we're both places in chapter 13, Genesis and in Numbers. So in Numbers 13, we have the 12 spies that have returned from their spying trip, and they're now back giving a report of what they have seen. The land seems to still be luscious like it was in the days of Lot, even though, like I said, this is hundreds of years later. And we will pick up this story in, let's see, verse 27 in Numbers chapter 13. This is now the 12 spies speaking, so it's one of the 10, and they give a report, and they told him and said, "We came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it." If you will do your studies, you will find that fruit that they brought it wasn't in Zoar, but it was in the southern end of Israel. And so it must have still been a very productive land. Verse 28, nevertheless, so these people, they had seen more than just the green grass and the vineyards. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land. Now I want you to make a connection. There's still no desire to take up a fight or to take up a battle. You will notice that in verse 28, that seems to have been the same idea that Lot had. No desire to take up a battle. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak, they're Anak that are giants. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. There you have it. And the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And it seems like the report is taking a negative direction. And Caleb jumps in. In the middle of the talk, Caleb jumps in, and you have it in verse 30. It seems like he's getting the feeling what's happening here. And Caleb stilled the people. Quit talking. And we can imagine that the whole congregation of Israel became quiet. And when everybody was quiet, Caleb spoke. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once. Let's quit focusing on the walls and on all the big cities. Let's go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." Till therefore right now. So here we see a man who is casting a vision, realizing that it will be a battle. And I want to encourage us, every one of us, as wherever in life you are, never embrace a vision or cast an idea that we will come to a point where we will have no battles to fight. You wish that battles could change. Obviously, if we're dealing with a sick child, we hope that it can get healthy again. That's why we go to the doctors. And amen. But it would be very foolish for us as young parents to think that once this child is going to be healthy, we will never be sick again. No, you expect next winter, maybe next month, we'll deal with the same thing. If you struggle in your family life, maybe your children don't listen. You can't seem not to be able to train your children. Again and again, you have to remind them. You know what? Every time I come and speak about family life, my children are concerned. I'm going to share something about home life. And I've never made real commitments that I won't. But you continue to remind them over and over, and you get tired of this stuff. We as parents could get stuck in the idea that if only my child would listen to me, and if it only would start to do as I would, my battles would be over. And so we start to wish for a battle-free life. And that is where we get discouraged. Let's live with it. Some of us that are 75 years and 80 years old, if these men would do us the favor, they would come up and say, life still holds a battle. We're not coming out of that battle. We somehow make the mistake sometimes when we think of a life like Caleb, that he never dealt with my things. Caleb just was a man above all the others. And that's not true. He was a man who chose to fight a battle. Let's go up at once. Caleb wanted to experience God's power. I know this might not sound very romantic or very attractive, but if you would tell the young people and say, you know what, if you really want to experience a lot of victories and battles in your life, just get married. You will find them there. Well, it would be foolish for us to say, oh, get married and all your problems are over. It doesn't work that way. So we could have this vision totally incorrect. Let's go up. We can handle it. We can fight it. Caleb was okay to know that there was a battle. We could take it up to 14. Now I want to start to apply it a little bit more to our home life, okay? So as a home, you and your partner, me and Marcela, us as a family, we have had to make choices where we felt that we would stand alone. And when I say alone, I'm not talking about wanting to encourage extremism. I don't want to encourage self-righteous, nothing of such. That's not the idea. But what I want to say is that sometimes you in your home will just need to make a choice that you feel that this is right. And then we hold it. If I just choose everything based on what I think people do and people think, you will end up with no structure and your children will get confused. Because we're always just looking, where more or less do I fit? Even though that is part of life. We want to be part of a circle. But Caleb was okay to stand alone from time to time. And so the first place where we see he stood alone was in chapter 14, verse 10. It doesn't actually say that he stood alone, but this is what the people said to him after he had spoken. But all the congregation bade stone them. Well, I said alone. He was with Joshua, his friend. So now we will stone these two people. So he was obviously standing on a completely different ground than the rest of his circle. So Caleb stood alone. Caleb stood alone many times in his life. The one thing that I remember, I want to share this with you as young families. Back in the days, some 20 years ago, I know this gripped me. If you are going to aim for a normal life, like let's just raise a normal family, we're slowly losing it, okay? We have to raise the standard. If it's just normal, we're just running with the flow. And the flow is slowly going downhill. Let's aim for higher ground. And this has been a lifesaver in many ways for us. So today, you and I stand, and as I want to apply this, let me just add a few more things of Caleb. Caleb, as he stood alone many times, he had to return. That would be an interesting message by itself. But Israel had to go back in the desert and lived another 40 years in the desert. Caleb survived all of that. It doesn't really bring him out at all. In those 40 years, Caleb and his wife, they raised the family. And they stood through it all. 40 years later, all of a sudden, Caleb comes back into the picture. Joshua chapter 15. Now, that's not the first time in the 40 years, but in Joshua chapter 15, Caleb comes back to life 40 years later. After he stood alone at Kadesh Barnea that we read in Numbers 14, Caleb comes back and it says, Joshua chapter 14, he speaks to Joshua there now, and he says, 40 years old was I when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to espy out the land. Verse 8 says, the end of verse 8, but I wholly followed the Lord my God. That's where you know that he stood alone from time to time. We in our home, we did things our way. We in our home, we made it clear that we are here to follow the Lord. I want to come to a little bit more detail here in just a few minutes. But Caleb had embraced a vision, not for an easy life, but he had embraced a vision to live it fully for the Lord. And he had a reason why. As he continues to talk in verse 10 at the end, he says, I am this day 85 years old. As yet I am as strong this day as I was in the day that Moses sent me. So he had held up with his physical strength, whereas his friends, their carcasses fell in the desert. Verse 12, this brought back the words that Caleb used in his life. These are the words that I wish that you as young families, these are the words that I wish that you as young people, and these are the words that I wish that we as the old people will continue to hold on. And that is, give me this mountain. That were the words of Caleb when he spoke to Moses, and later when he spoke to Joshua. Give me that mountain. And I'm assuming he saw a mountain somewhere. Maybe it was a mountainous area, and he just simply said, give me the mountain. Now, if you do a little bit of study, what was in the statement? That's where the giants lived. Give me the giants. I want to fight them. I have the favor of the Lord with me. Young families, older people, wherever you are in the state, young people, youth, do you realize that you want to fight the battle because you have the Lord on your side? Let's fight it. Let's face it. Today we stand and gaze into the future. What do you see? And what do you choose? Lot, he saw Sodom and Gomorrah. I think Lot knew the lifestyle of Sodom and Gomorrah. So he must have somehow faced that. As I studied this, a conversation that my son and me had yesterday, and we've had these conversations more times. Some of us have had these conversations. When Lot, it says he looked east. So I'm thinking he looked north, but he turned east, and he saw the good land, and he saw Sodom and Gomorrah there. Lot knew that in Sodom and Gomorrah there was all kinds of immorality that was shameful. When he gazed into the future, I assume that he made some kind of a choice how he would deal with that. As we grow up, and as we grow up with our young men, we need to ask the same question. What is the plan? What is the plan? Sodom and Gomorrah today is not living in the east. It's living in your house. It's living in your pocket. What's the plan? You don't need to be attached to that, but is there a plan? As we raise our families, are we educating them what the potential is in Sodom and Gomorrah? We are not like Caleb physically back in the days of Kadesh Barnea when he and his 10 friends came back, or 11 friends. But we are in the year of 2024. And we too have giants that seem to scare us. We would like that easy life. We would like a life of good income. We would like a life where we can basically do what we want as far as finances are concerned. We would like a luxurious living. When Caleb was influenced by the Israelites in Numbers chapter 14, then Caleb stilled the people. I don't know if that means much to you and me, but I'm convinced that we live in a time when you as a dad, you as a youth boy, or as a youth girl, you will sometimes have to still the people. Influence. Social media that influences us. Like really what Caleb was facing in the midst of a negative Israelite nation wasn't altogether much different than what you and I are exactly reading today in the news or allowing us to be influenced by. Have you ever heard that somebody would say, don't read the news, it's all negative? Have you ever heard a statement like that? I think you have. Why do people say that? Do we think that's a new idea? It's not very new because it was exactly that way in the days of Caleb. But Caleb realized, I have to still the people. This is going to destroy us. This is going to destroy my family. This is destroying my home. And so Caleb stood alone. Well, he and Joshua, as we know the story. How will you and I navigate? Like, we cannot avoid Sodom and Gomorrah like Lot didn't, because we live in it on a social way. You and I will not avoid political involvement. We live in it. And that in itself is there. It's not saying that it's all evil. Sodom and Gomorrah, that's all evil, but political involvement or influence. But the big question is, as we raise our families, how will we navigate through this? Will we get sucked in? Will we get influenced by the negativity of that, by the dreadfulness of that, by the fearfulness of that? The Israelites, the 10 spies, they came home and they were filled with fear because they had been influenced. You and I can be filled with the same kind of fear today, thinking that we live in a totally time spell, which we do. But you know what? As a home, as a father, we could get into this fear and start to respond in a way of fearing. Let's be clear, we don't. The question is, as we embrace the future, whether you're young in your life or whether you're somewhere else, are you getting sucked into this stuff? To the point where Lot was okay to call them his brothers? Or will we stand alone? And will we influence them? I remember a good meeting that I had with a politician, a good friend of mine. One time I went to his office and I said to him, you know what? This does not work. What you're doing does not work. How can I influence you otherwise? That was my goal of going there. You know what? We will probably never influence much by being politically involved. Probably not. But we will definitely influence our community by strong homes. We will influence the nation by strong homes and strong marriages and strong families. If we will be the people that can give a clear life pattern, we will be the ones that influence to power and to hope in the Lord. My heart aches when I think of the many of my friends that when we were young spoke pleasant words of a good future, of a good vision. At the same time, were totally careless about ridiculing their upbringing or their parents and the way they had led. And today, I realize many of them are in a very misfortunate situation with their own homes. Broken families, broken marriages. That merits the question, what's my vision? It's easy to correct. It's easy to say, oh, mom and dad did do things wrong. That's easy to say. But the question today is, where are you going? I like what Joshua that used, and we sang the verse before. Joshua 24, you know the verse by memory. Choose you this day whom ye will serve. And he gives them 3 options. I've often wondered, what did Joshua have in mind with 3 options? Why not just this or that? He gives them 3 options. Basically, he sounds like they're going to choose just 2 of the 3. Whether the gods which your fathers served that were in the other side of the flood. This is what we today could say the old way, the old time. Let's just stay conservative like mom and dad or like grandparents do. Let's go back to what grandparents used to be, the old way. Or you have the new way, the modern way. Or the gods of the Amorites, that was the current time. So you choose whether you want to be of the old time or of the modern time. Both of them were idols. we would say, what's the difference? And that's exactly what we need to say today. What's the difference? Whether you are a modern person or whether you are an old-time person. What's the difference? It really doesn't make a difference whether you serve the God of Egypt or the God of the Amorites, we would say. And I want to close with this. Many people today make the choice between these two. Many people very firmly have made the choice between one or the other. But many people miss to choose. No, it's not modern. It's not old-fashioned. I will serve the Lord. I have a vision. As a father, as parents, we have a vision. We are not being influenced by neither of the two, but we are here to stand alone if it needs be. We're here to serve the Lord. Families, I know I'm not in detail. I know I'm not in those little details of how to punish or how to encourage or how to keep yourself going. But let's just be clear. What is my vision? What is happening? Are you today in your marriage? Are you today in your child training? Are you today in your life, wherever that is? Is it clear that I am here and my purpose is that my life, my home is here to honor the Lord? The way I think, the way I speak to my children, the way I think about my children, the way I think and speak to my spouse, the influence that I'm giving. Is that obvious that your life here is here to honor the Lord? If that is the number one goal, my dear family, church family, you know what? We can echo what Caleb said. If the Lord is with us, we can do it. Give me that mountain. Let's all be clear that I am here with my home, with our home, to honor the Lord. We are here to serve him. God bless you. Let's keep up with courage.